Hi, everyone, and thanks for checking out this movie review. So, today I'll be continuing with my Nightmare on Elm Street franchise review. And today I'll be taking a look at A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master from 1988. So, yeah, I'll just kind of go through the setup and premise of the movie, and then I'll get into my review. Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Masters was released, as I said, in 1988. It's an American fantasy slasher film, the fourth installment in the series, the franchise. The film this time was directed by Rennie Harlan. And it stars Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger, Lisa Wilcox as Alice Johnson, Tuesday Night as Kristen Parker, Danny Hassel as Dan Jordan, Brooke Thies as Debbie Stevens, Ken Sagas as Kincaid, Rodney Eastman as Joey, Andres Jones as Rick, and Toy Newwork as Sheila. So basically, it takes place, as I said, 1 year following the previous film, Dream Warriors. Following the death of Nancy Thompson, Freddy Krueger reappears in the dreams of Kristen Parker, Joey, and Kincaid. After completing his revenge against those three, who are the kids of the parents who killed him, Krueger uses Kristen's best friend, Alice Johnson, to gain access to new victims in order to satisfy his murderous needs. So yeah, that's basically the premise of it. Kristen's the one that initially starts having the weird dreams where she thinks Freddy's around. The other two, Joey and Kincaid, try to convince her that they killed Freddy, he's dead and gone, and if she keeps going in and to his house and stuff, she might stir him up. And ultimately, of course, that's what happens. He becomes resurrected and takes care of unfinished business, I guess, with the last of the Elm Street children, and then. Before, like I said, then we're introduced to Alice, played by Lisa Wilcox, and a bunch of other new characters who sort of take over the rest of the movie. So that's basically the movie in a nutshell. As far as my thoughts about it, I will say that there's some nostalgia with this one. This is the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie that I remember seeing when I was about 10 years old, late 80s, around 1990 maybe. Um, so it does have some nostalgia because I do remember this one. I'll just kind of go through my pros and cons for this movie. Kind of like part two, it's a pretty mixed bag for me. Um, I'll start with the pros. I like the setting, the high school '80s high school setting that they use. I know they use that in parts one and two, but it's used more here, and it just felt really fitting and really cool. I just think that's a great horror slasher setting. I like the movie theater scene with Alice when she gets sucked into the screen and becomes from goes from a three-dimensional character into a two-dimensional character. That was really cool. I'm not sure how they did that, but great visuals and practical effects in this movie. That being one of them. Um, everybody talks about the cockroach scene, of course, with the visuals and effects there. It's got a really solid '80s soundtrack and the nightmare score of the movie. Tuesday Night, as I mentioned, sings the opening. Actually, I didn't mention that. Tuesday Night, who plays Kristen Parker in this movie, actually sings the opening song as the credits roll at the beginning of this movie. So that's pretty cool. Good soundtrack. Lisa Wilcox does a good job playing Alice, I think. Um, her character has a character arc. Unfortunately, she's the only character that does with any development either. But Lisa Wilcox does a really good job of taking the character from being shy and awkward to being really confident and um, standing up for herself and her friends by the end of the movie. Um, the movie definitely is just different. It stands on its own, kind of like part two. It's got a very unique signature by the director, Rennie Harlan. I give him credit for trying something different. Um, they have very creative and visually wild deaths and dream sequences. The cockroach, um, the in the school where Sheila gets the life sucked out of her, literally, and ends up being an asthma attack in real life. Um, Joey in the waterbed. Um, Another thing I really liked was the dream loop that Alice and Dan got stuck in by Freddy in order to keep him at bay while he took care of Sheila. That was a really cool scene, just really fun. Um, and there's a pretty good final confrontation with Alice and Freddy. Not as good as the confrontations we get in parts one and three. It might be a little better than the one we get in part two. But it's pretty good. So those would be my pros for the movie. As far as cons go, I hate to do it, but I have to start with Tuesday Night. I think she does a good job of singing that opening Nightmare song, but that's about it. I really didn't care for her, especially in the role of Kristen Parker, which was made so, which was done so well and made so famously by Patricia Arquette. I know they tried to get Patricia Arquette back for this movie, and depending on who you believe, either she was busy and was conflicted with other things, or they just didn't want to pay her the money that she asked for. And I tend to believe it was the excuse me. I tend to believe it was the latter, that she probably was asking for more money than they wanted to pay to keep the movie at bay at budget. So, but I think that was a mistake. I think it would have been important enough to the movie to bring her back. So yeah, not a fan of Tuesday Night in that role at all. Um, Killing the three surviving Dream Warrior characters right off the bat. I mean, literally in the first 20 minutes of this movie, Joey Kincaid and Kristen are all killed. And so I wasn't a fan of that, especially the way they were killed. It was very arbitrary, very kind of like we need to get rid of these characters to bring in the new ones. Not fitting deaths at all, especially with everything we've gone through with them, especially for Kristen, who became such an iconic character in the third movie. Yeah, just really cheap and not well done at all, in my opinion. Um, Not a strong story to this movie. The first three movies in this franchise had pretty good stories, pretty good writing. It's no secret the writers' strike happened when they started making this movie, and rather than wait, they had to rush it out, of course, for money. So they basically made it up as they went along. I think Rennie Harlan's quoted as saying he used a lot of his own dreams and nightmares and put them in this movie. And you can tell this movie is very pieced together. It's very scene, this scene, this scene, as opposed to a comprehensive or cohesive, I should say, a cohesive movie from beginning to end, like the first three movies in the franchise were. Um, so yeah, that definitely plagued the movie. I felt like I was just watching a bunch of scenes. And even though some of them were visually stunning and good and interesting, it just wasn't. They didn't work as a movie together. This is obviously one of the sillier movies in the franchise. This is where they started to really not only light Freddy up visually, but also they lightened him up to where it's one liner after one liner after one liner, not really a lot of horror. The sadistic Freddy, the mean Freddy, the horror Freddy, if you will. The icon's pretty much gone. Then he becomes the comedic game show host Freddy, and this movie is certainly the start of that. Um, yeah, and on to that point, they made Freddy the focal point of the movie. I mean, he's the first name introduced even before the opening Nightmare credits is Robert Englund in A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, and there's a reason for it, because if you watch this movie, the movie's all about Freddy. It's kind of like what they did with Chucky in some of the later sequels, namely Bride and Seed, where they made these movies all about him, and then the characters are basically just like side characters, and that's why those movies don't work as well. The best horror movies are where we have strong lead performances, and then the villain is there, certainly getting his due, but he's more in the background. And yeah, they made Robert Englund the star, and I don't think it worked very well. Robert Englund's always entertaining to watch. I'm certainly not going to rip him at all for this movie, but this is where the scales tipped to the comedy, and the horror basically flew out of the house here. No pun intended. Just too much comedy, too many one-liners from Freddy. No scares, no horror. A lot of the new characters, besides Lisa Wilcox, who plays Alice, are not memorable. They're not well acted. The characters don't really give us anything that we care about when they're killed, like they did in Dream Warriors and even the original. This is definitely more of a visually appealing, entertaining movie than a horror slasher movie. Which, if you like horror comedies, and that's fine, you'll probably like this movie. Then I actually like horror movies, so I actually like being scared, or at least a good attempt at it. And this movie doesn't have any of that. And then my final con is how Freddy is killed. I mentioned that I did enjoy the visual part of it, where the souls are ripping out of his chest and ripping him apart. I actually thought that was a pretty interesting and fitting way for Freddy to meet his ultimate demise, it would seem. Wink, wink. Um, because we were introduced to the chest of souls in the previous movie. That's kind of the big hook. The fact that they were the ones that killed Freddy by escaping and ripping him apart was fitting. But how they get there is ridiculous. With this whole nursery rhyme about just this nursery rhyme that Alice discovers in the dream when Freddy's about to do her in, and she basically grabs a piece of glass and shows him his reflection, and that's what causes the souls to leave, I guess, because of his ugliness. That's the best I can guess. Yeah, not a fan of that. So, excuse me. As I said, a very mixed bag with this movie. Um, it does have some nostalgia. It is visually appealing. Um, Stands out. It's different in the movie. Not a rehash or any. There's not. It's not like any of the other movies in the franchise. Whether that's good or bad, I guess I'll leave up to you. I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10 on my rating. It's a mixed bag again. It has some good things, but it also has some things that drive me nuts. Namely, that it's not scary. I don't care about any of the characters other than Alice, and Freddy's just too comedic, and the tone of the movie is gone from the horror tone and dark tone they had in the first three movies. Now it's just like a comedy tone. So yeah, 7 out of 10. Go ahead and give your thoughts and comments down below on what you think of this movie. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel to see future Nightmare on Elm Street reviews, as well as future reviews on other horror franchises and other standalone movies. So thank you for watching this video. Have a great day. Bye.